Sounds good. Let's see, George, do you want to kick off the recording? And Valerie, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So welcome everyone. This is the first meeting for the new SIG Usability. Yeah, exciting that it's finally happening, but there's a lot of stuff for us to do. So we have a somewhat sparse but deep agenda today around kind of narrowing down what we're actually going to be working on. I really want to make sure that we pick things that are attainable and we can actually get done, as opposed to kind of spitting out a lot of what ifs and not being able to deliver on them. So we've had a tiny bit of discussion on the mailing list. I think like one thing we've already agreed upon is that we want to launch some kind of a study at this point in time of our users. Is Gabby on the call? Yeah. Do you want to speak more to that?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so just the idea around the survey, and I can pull the proposal up if anybody wants to, but it's just to kind of, since people had expressed interest in defining personas and kind of like key tasks that people, end users are doing, a survey would be just kind of like a good quantitative way to start collecting that. I know SIG PM, I think that they work with end users as well, so it would also feel like a good collaboration opportunity with them. And basically, it would just give us some way to quantitatively define personas and set us up for being able to either at the same time or later do like deep dives, like more qualitative studies with users.
That makes sense. Can you give us an example of the kind of data or like the kind of personas that you're expecting to dig into?
Yeah, so let me pull up, I can actually share the proposal. Yeah, let's see. Here we go. So I had just, again, this is a work in progress, but some of the things that I thought would be interesting to capture as far as personas would be, obviously they're who they are, which I think is captured in their job, and kind of like what their main goals are with using Kubernetes. So kind of like people profiles, but then also team profiles, because they work kind of like in a team context, and then also company profiles, because that also impacts kind of like the way you use Kubernetes. So I left the question categories kind of vague, because I feel like that would be part of defining them a little bit more granularly. But that's just kind of the idea.
That looks great. I especially like that we would be establishing a group of people who might be interested in contributing to future studies, so that we could start to kind of get ongoing feedback from different people.
Yeah.
I would really love to see in a survey like this more information about people's kind of knowledge level, what they're using and what their requirements are. I've found a lot when talking to like small and medium companies that they kind of just pile on like the keywords that they find and they don't necessarily know what they need. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of help with people solving their problems as opposed to using like a checklist of technologies.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, let me cancel that. I think that's in there.
So as someone who's not as familiar with like the product side of things, what would kind of be like the goal or step 2 of getting this data?
I think, Brendan had mentioned working with a third party. I think that that's interesting, but at the same time, I think also kind of knowing, I listed some examples of similar work that's been done, and quite a bit of it is actually within the Kubernetes community. So that's awesome. And so knowing kind of like what survey tools are available to us, I think would also help us kind of like get started. Just to know kind of like the complexity of the questions that we can do. sometimes with like good survey tools, you can kind of say, if we're starting to get someone that we feel classifies as maybe like a more experienced, you can kind of target the questions towards them as opposed to someone that may be mid or like lower on the experience level.
Okay, so I think what Brandon was basically saying. Brendan was saying was was that we can get funding if there's a tool that we want to use that costs money, but also I think the CNCF has login accounts that we could potentially use for things like SurveyMonkey, if like a pro account of that is like what we needed to kind of get what you were talking about, like with the different branching paths or whatever.
Yeah, SurveyMonkey would be awesome.
Okay, yeah, and so I'm assuming that the pieces that you just mentioned, like we'd have to have a pro account for that. It wouldn't be part of the free account.
Most likely.
Okay, okay, yeah, that's cool. So if we basically were to like, and so can you share this proposal and maybe drop a link into our meeting notes so people can check it out and leave comments?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. So I think once everyone's taken a look and we kind of, I mean, we can get started, like we can double check this, but I think probably the way to move forward is if people want to take a look at that and offer feedback. And then Gabby, obviously, we don't want to make it too complicated, which I think is why you're keeping it very simple so that we don't lose users by asking too many questions. But maybe you can keep leading the design on that. And then if SurveyMonkey seems like the right tool, we can try and figure out how to get access to that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay, so we've thrown around a number of ideas. Like I tossed out stuff in the mailing list. There was a lot of stuff in GitHub. I think it'd be really good to go for specifically one other project as well as a user study, not branching out too much, but the user study is going to take a lot of time and like people like me can't contribute as effectively to it. So I'm kind of curious as to what people's thoughts are for what's something that's kind of attainable and impactful. And also how we might judge that. Like if anyone has a particular methodology for sorting projects, like difficulty, impact, applicability.
So one idea that I tossed around when we were originally working on the charter was the idea of kind of looking at what Microsoft has done with like their inclusive design initiative and seeing if we could do something like that from a Kubernetes perspective, like having Kubernetes inclusive design. And so I think that that would be a really cool project because once we got something simple up, it would be code that people could contribute to. And I think it would be something that people of different levels of both coding and design capabilities would be able to kind of grab onto and like run with. So that was one idea.
So for the context of everyone on the call, what would like inclusive design be?
Yeah, so looking at, so I'll just drop a link to like the Microsoft inclusive design piece. And sorry, did someone else want to talk?
Oh, I can talk to that a little bit. So
Okay.
Microsoft includes, so this is Pamela, everybody. Hi, I work with Tasha at VMware. So Microsoft came up with this inclusive design website to help designers to build more accessible websites. So they have like toolkits and guidelines, principles that you can follow when you're designing for websites to make your websites more accessible. So when we were talking about this within VMware, like when I started designing for a product that is using Kubernetes, one thing I found really difficult was to look at it from the designer's perspective. How do I go about looking at things because everything you see online today is all code related about the technology, but nobody ever talks about the user, the problems they're facing. How does one monitor a Kubernetes application? What does health mean? Like there was not enough details about, a designer's guide to Kubernetes. So when we came about in the team, together, we were discussing about, we have all these designers coming on board, designing for Kubernetes, but it's very difficult to navigate through this technology as a designer. So just like a starter's guide to what it is to design for Kubernetes, what are all the objects that you need to focus on as a designer, which might be on the interface side of things. What does it mean to monitor and troubleshoot a Kubernetes application? What is and then, on Gabby's point, how do we define it for each persona? because we do have multiple personas that are using Kubernetes. So this is kind of like, the thought process behind making something similar as inclusive design. And I think Tasha is sharing the link on that website, which can kind of give you an idea about what it means, to look at something similar to that.
Hi, this is Raji here. On the lines of what you just mentioned, I think it was Brandon who had mentioned that we could have an assessment of our current accessibility issues with the Kubernetes artifacts, which I think CNCF does have some sponsorship to have a contractor hired to give us an assessment of where we are now currently. And probably we could leverage that. And he'd asked us to get on to create a statement of work. If anyone's interested, we could. I started on it. I haven't completed yet. If anyone's interested, we could work together on that and provide him that so that he could help with that. The second aspect about the user journey is I'm from SIG Docs, so yeah, we do have a two persona user journey already sorted out with Kubernetes. One is for the cluster operator, another one is for the developers. So what we did there was all the content that was required for cluster operator was put in that user journey, which they didn't have to dwell in details to know more about what a developer needed from our Kubernetes documentation. Is that something that you would like to explore too?
I guess I wouldn't want to step on SIGDoc's toes if they have a project that's ongoing, but obviously if there's something that they'd like to collaborate on or they have an ongoing project that they'd like input on, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I was talking more in terms of collaboration here.
Cool. Yeah. I would say if you have any links to things that you'd like, and it would also be awesome to get maybe a presentation at the next meeting on that. That would be cool.
Yeah, I could talk to the SIG chairs if they would be interested in talking about it to us, or just give us an overview of what they did with their user journey and where it is now.
That sounds like a good first step.
Yeah.
Okay, any more offhand suggestions? I'm kind of surprised there's not more. We had a lot of things come up on GitHub.
I think things will kind of organically pop up too. We'll see.
Yeah, I was thinking it would be interesting to look at common translation tooling or like a translation shim for the API, but I'm definitely not familiar with like what the state of translation and things like kubectl on the dashboard is.
Yeah, we should check that out. I think there is an internationalization effort going on, possibly as a working group, but that would be good for us to kind of check out and be aware of.
I'm not sure if Rael is on the call. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm on the call, but I currently is 11 o'clock in Barcelona, so I'm running from the office to home. But I think currently kubectl has already implementing some kind of localization effort. So you can, I think you can use kubectl in Japanese, in Italian, and some other language, but at least the localization files from kubectl are like 2 years old. So I think it's something that started some time ago, but it's not being used right now. So maybe we can check the folks that started this effort and see how they make it, or just working in a new way that is unified across projects, because it's an effort from kubectl, but maybe we need to make like a common way of translating tools and apply the same thing on all the repos. Otherwise, we have like individual workarounds for each project. And the good thing, I think, is get the best tool for all the projects and try to implement the same thing everywhere instead of like each sub-project going his own way for localizing.
Yeah, that was one thing we wanted to look at, making sure that people don't have to kind of rebuild that basic plumbing whenever they want to add translations, because that's also a hurdle for adding them in the first place.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get folks from SIG Docs involved on localizing, because at the end, localizing tools is you have a list of phrases and you just need to make the version on your language. So it's it's an easy work to. It's easier than rewrite a full document from a huge concept with 3,000 words. Like localizing is small phrases that you only need to put in your own language. So, and there is a tool from Google that you load this file of phrases, and you can work with a team and localize all the phrases and work in all of them. So once we have the tooling, I think it will be easy to go to the localization teams on each SIG Docs sub project and get some folks from there to work on localizing the tool in this case.
Yeah, that's quite true about SIG Docs. We do have a pretty good process in place for localization. We already have it translated in more than 8-9 languages now. So the localization team is quite happy about the process there. But tooling, as Rael mentioned, we could work on that. Thank you.
Yeah, once we have the proper tooling, it will be easy to get people that is not used to code, but for to the language. So they only need to focus on language instead of code. And then if we make easy this process from getting a tool, implementing the tooling around the workflows with Git or the tool that we choose, it will be easy to get people involved on the language and some maintainers that just make the integration between the language work and the tooling.
So I have a question here. So this translation of kubectl, is it like already adopted by the users, or it's still under process?
I'm not really sure because the language files are there. The code is implemented to support language files. But
okay.
it's like 2 years old, so I didn't have the chance to use, but it's an easy thing to test. You only need to set your environment language, run kubectl, and see what happens. But yeah, it's something that is there. You can check it in the kubectl. I think I shared the repo in the Slack, but I can share it again just to get like some overview on how it's implemented. But I don't think it's like a standard supported way. Maybe we need to talk across SIGs and see how each one is implementing them. Because in documentation, the same thing happened. Each team was making his own website, one's using Hugo, one's using Jekyll. So we need to tackle the problem on the beginning, looking for a common tool, and then share this with the teams instead of having each one going his own way or his own tooling.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just an idea. I mean, if it is already in progress, maybe we can start from there if kubectl is already being adopted by the users.
Yeah, I was going to ask if anyone wanted to kind of take point on checking in with that and kind of specking out more what we would do or what that would look like. Because I think at this point, since everything's exploratory, maybe we can have a couple people like go off and check out one thing and kind of report back on the logistics.
Yeah, let me do that. I'll sync up with Rail and then.
Okay. Would you mind just adding that as a note to the doc?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any similar ideas? I think like common translation tooling is probably going to be like a really good choice to work on soon, but.
I think, Rajita already said, but having tools to check how accessible is the website, and I did to the pipeline. So you can, right now we are in Hugo, and there's a lot of work that can be done to improve the website accessibility to the docs and the events. So maybe try to put some effort on that, checking how currently the website is, if it's accessible, because in the end, the website is one of the entry points of a newcomer to the community. So we need to make sure that how accessible is the web at this moment, and just try to make some tweaks to make the website more accessible to the new folks. This evening we were discussing with this thing, and we found an Udemy course about web accessibility. You can share with the people that are interested. I'm taking this course, and you have like all the steps that you need to take in account when you are running a website. So we can learn for that and make some points and on some actions that we can do during this first like a step of the SIG. Sorry for my English is not. I'm from Spain. I'm still like tricking my brain to speak English. So if it's something that is not like understandable, just let me know, and I will try to make it again.
No worries. Yeah, we'll ask for clarification if we need it.
Just to summarize, Rael and I have been taking up some courses on Udemy about accessibility, and yeah, we already had work in progress PR for checking the accessibility of our website content through our Netlify bot. I would say it was 80% done. We did use a tool on GitHub, but it wasn't super successful. Probably this is the place where we could have it implemented. Okay.
Maybe I can give you an assignment of kind of checking back with SIG docs and seeing what kind of collaborative efforts might be useful there.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay. Anyone else have any other suggestions?
Hi, this is Alistair. Work for VMware out in Boston on the East Coast. Something that I don't know if anyone thinks this is a good idea, but I wonder if any thoughts, previous thoughts or current thinking about the visual language of representing Kubernetes resources is something that is useful. Iconography is not my forte, but I know it's something that isn't consistent across efforts. So from a usability point of view, it seems like some guidelines around that might be useful.
Yeah, I agree. There's a number of bits of like official iconography, but they're not very extensive or necessarily very logical. Like the pod icon is like a bit of a cloud and a play button, for example, and that doesn't really seem to mean anything necessarily. Yeah, something like that would be interesting, though that's definitely the kind of thing that I'd want to like point a professional designer at.
Does anybody know if SIG UI has any of that on their roadmap by any chance?
No, but I know one of the chairs, so I can bug him about it.
Or is open to suggestions?
One thing that I was kind of thinking about was looking at adding some, looking to see how difficult and invasive it would be to add some telemetry into the system to get like an idea of what kind of interactions people are having, what like shape of workloads they're running, what kind of resources they're using, to get more of an idea of like what users necessarily need. Because like we see points of like developer frustration around what's confusing, and we see scaling limits, but we don't necessarily see like what's a median workload type in Kubernetes. What are people using the most? What are people like hacking around the most? But that's something I think it will require like a little bit of just hacking at to see how feasible it is to even get usable stats.
Yeah, and if people are afraid that it hits their operational efficiency and turn it off. But I think it's a really cool idea, and that we should check it out.
Yeah, I'll maybe look at that because I was going to volunteer for the translation stuff. We've already got someone, which is awesome.
I was going to ask whether or not any of that data was available in anonymized form from a managed service provider already.
We could certainly ask if anyone wanted to open source that.
Yeah, I suspect the answer would be no, but like we know who to bug for things like that. So we can find out if there's any like even basic stuff like numbers of pods, numbers of nodes, like averaged out, could be interesting.
And I guess that is something that we could try to get through user data too. As part of a survey, we could ask people what kind of workloads they're running, what the normal distribution of their cluster is, like stuff like that.
Yeah, it would be also like cool to get an idea of scale, because that's a thing that really changes the game.
Yeah.
What users have to do.
Yeah, and if we could, it would be, I mean, there's like interesting ways that we could try to associate it, because like there may not be really like any relationship between size of organization and size of clusters, right? Like it might be more like what kind of workloads am I running on these clusters? But it would be interesting to have kind of like the user data and then like the cluster data and see if we could map any sort of, I don't know, might be fun.
Yeah, like cluster topology is always a weird topic. How many clusters do you run? How do you manage them? What kind of workloads go on them?
Yeah.
Everyone's got a different and very strong opinion.
Yeah.
So I think I've said all of my bits. I think, do we have anything else scheduled on the agenda?
The only other things to do are, and the links are all in the agenda, which if you have the meeting notice, which you have to have because you found the Zoom link to come here, you'll see that there are links in the agenda to our new repo, which currently has basically nothing in it. But the idea is that that can become a place that we can contribute code and collaborate on proof of concepts and have shared doc links. Because a lot of times with SIGs and working groups, you end up with kind of like a bunch of Google Docs like floating all over the place. So as we have some docs that are like describing what we're doing and how we're doing it, we should just add a docs page that we can add links to. So it's very easy for people to kind of find a single point that they can read a lot about what we're doing on. And then as we have proof of concepts or some code or whatever, like it becomes a really easy place for us to collaborate. So I would encourage you, if you start working on a prototype or something, like feel free to just add it there. I have a PR up on that repo to add instructions for how you can become a member of the Kubernetes SIG organization in case we want to end up having a project tracker or anything like that, and information about how to become a reviewer of code like over time and stuff. Additionally, I posted a link to our charter if anyone wants to read our charter and kind of see what the overarching mission of this group is. That's a good link to read up on.
Thank you. You did a great job, Tasha. And I know Valerie and you have been leading us. Thanks for leading us and taking on all the efforts.
Cool, thanks everybody. Well, just to kind of wrap up, we are planning on having this meeting every 3 weeks. If you have something that you would like to add to the agenda, that doc is open for editing. So you can mention on the mention on our Google group that you have a topic, and I can add you, or you can add yourself if it looks like there's time. We also plan to have a little open mic session at the end in case there's no time for, and you have like a quick thing you want to bring up. But yeah, looking forward to getting these efforts kicked off and chat with you all soon.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.